I'm Tracy Sable. Tonight on EWTN News Nightly, be fearless. Pope Francis wraps up World Youth Day with a message to young people and a mass before more than 1 million people. We have a report from Lisbon. Political pushback. Republicans in the House continue their investigation into possible financial crimes by President Joe Biden. Important deadline. New developments in the coup in Niger. We have analysis. And on the ballot, a preview of tomorrow's special election in Ohio, which could impact the pro-life movement. These stories and more tonight.
From EWTN, the Global Catholic Network, this is EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you for being with us on the Feast of St. Sixtus II. Our top story tonight, the nearly week-long World Youth Day wrapped up yesterday in Portugal with more than 1 million people attending the closing Mass celebrated by the Holy Father. Pope Francis reminded attendees to shine, to listen, and to, quote, be not afraid.
No tengan miedo. No tengan miedo.
The Holy Father also encouraged the young pilgrims to change the world, saying more people need to work for justice and peace. The world needs you, the Pope said, like the earth needs rain. He also invited each of them to repeat silently in their hearts, do not be afraid. EWTN News Vatican correspondent Colin Flynn has more on what was an important week for the Church.
In his homily, the Holy Father's strong message, quoting St. Pope John Paul II, when he told the young people, be not afraid. He repeated this again and again, asked for a moment of silence for the young people to say it in their mind. He went on then to thank everyone, the young people, to thank the authorities, the President, the Prime Minister, everyone involved in making this such a successful World Youth Day. At the end, he said, I want to thank two people particularly, Jesus Christ and our Blessed Mother. The night before that, here in Tejo Park by the Tejo River in Lisbon, we had the nighttime vigil, which was, we had a week of moments of complete ecstasy and joy and a lot of noise and happiness. But this was a time when 1.5 million young people came here under the cover of darkness in the park, and there was such silence and reverence for the adoration as they had that vigil. It was really moving, again, with the Holy Father. Those young people camped then all night here in the park for the Mass this morning. We had the Way of the Cross before that as well. Powerful, strong testimonies from young people speaking to the Holy Father. But Tracy, just to point out, here in Lisbon, this is a city of only 500,000 people, a population of 500,000, to have an influx of 1.5 million young people for the week. And we are told no increase in crime, no rowdiness, no violence, no vandalism. I mean, this population, 1.5 million people coming in, that's greater than countries like, some countries here in Europe like Estonia and Latvia. To have that many people and to have such a peaceful, joyful atmosphere the whole way through, that is quite extraordinary. So all eyes are on where are we going next? Well, at the end of the Mass today, the Holy Father made the announcement asking the young people to come to Rome 2025 for the year of Jubilee. Of course, that invitation there. But then he said we are going from west. Remember, they used to regard this as the edge of the world, Lisbon. From the west of Europe, we're going east. And in 2027, the next World Youth Day will be held in Seoul, the capital of South Korea. So when he announced that, there were cheers from parts of the crowd. You saw the South Korean flags waving high. And I had my Irish flag here waving as well, representing the Emerald Isle. But I think, Tracy, to summarize overall, just an incredible sense of joy, an incredible success. Skeptics leading up to this were wondering, would the numbers come because of many different reasons? The numbers came far greater than expected. The Pope leaving them with the message again today, be not afraid. Tracy, from myself and all the crew here, until next time, it is Colin Flynn for EWTN News Nightly.
All right, and thank you, Colin. Great job out there. Well, the Holy Father met with reporters on his way back to Rome, and he addressed his prayers for peace during a visit to the Shrine of Fatima.
Bueno, la mia salute va bene.
Talking to journalists on the plane, Pope Francis said that his health is fine, and he underlined the importance of knowing how to accompany the young people who are always a surprise. The Holy Father emphasized that the Church welcomes everyone, adding it is like a mother who guides her children on how to grow in their faith through prayer and interior dialogue. Well, back here in the United States, lawmakers continue to trade heated words on two major investigations taking place in Washington. House Republicans say that there is more to come in the probe of the Biden family business dealings, and some question the Justice Department's handling of former President Trump's indictments. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales is following all the developments. Eric.
Good evening, Tracy. You know, the House Oversight Committee's investigation into alleged Biden family ties to foreign nationals isn't slowing down. A former Biden business associate, Devon Archer, gave a transcribed interview behind closed doors last week. The top Democrat on the committee, Congressman Jamie Raskin, released a statement bashing Republicans. The lead Democrat states, quote, once again, committee Republicans' priority investigation into President Biden has failed to produce any evidence of wrongdoing by President Biden and shows the extent to which congressional Republicans are willing to distort, twist, and manipulate the facts. But Oversight Committee Chair Congressman James Comer says there's convincing evidence of wrongdoing.
This next week we will release more bank records. We'll do our third bank memo where we show some interesting wire transfers and some suspicious bank activity that I think the American people will have a lot of questions about.
Republicans continue to question the Justice Department's motives in the Hunter Biden case. And now, with the indictment of former President Donald Trump, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy charges the indictment was political.
It seems as though every time Trump goes higher in the poll, he gets a new indictment. It seems to me, after you learn of the real dealings behind the Bidens, the next day he gets indicted. Anytime there is new information, the federal government just seems to have a two-tier system.
Democrats say
this will perhaps be the most important criminal trial in American history. So in my view, we need to let the sunshine in. We need to do our very best to defeat any sort of conspiracy theories that are going to be spread about what is going on in the court proceedings.
2024 is really going to be a decisive election in this country. In my view, it's going to be a rematch between President Biden and President Trump, and the American people really are going to get to weigh in on whether we count our votes, whether it's okay if you lose an election to try to subvert the process.
Meanwhile, Alabama Senator Tommy Tuberville continues to block more than 300 military nominations because of the DOD's new abortion policy. Some Democratic senators are urging the majority leader to start confirming senior military positions one by one on the floor, including the Joint Chiefs of Staff. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
President Joe Biden returns from vacation, but for Americans, there is no vacation from inflation. The same for rising gas prices. AAA reports a gallon of gas nationwide nearing $4. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports.
Tracy, after events here at the White House, President Joe Biden departs for Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah. He'll be on the road most of the week for a combination of speeches and fundraisers.
President Joe Biden walks along the South Lawn, not stopping to talk to reporters lined up to meet him.
Mr. President!
One thing he cannot ignore, inflation. It's come down from more than 9% last summer to 3% in June. But prices for cereal, for example, still painful, up 8.8%. On Thursday, new inflation numbers due to arrive. Economists are forecasting a 3.3% rise in prices from a year ago. And beginning tonight, the president travels west, touting his Inflation Reduction Act and also raising campaign cash. Meanwhile, the president defends abortion, tweeting an image that says, if Congress passes a national abortion ban, I will veto it. But the head of SBA Pro-Life America writes, the abortion industry is desperate. They're resorting to increasingly dangerous and unethical tactics to feed their greed and fight for the minds of the American people as more Americans wake up to the deadly truth about abortion. And at the State Department today, Secretary Antony Blinken remembered the 25th anniversary of the U.S. Embassy bombings in Kenya and Tanzania, which killed hundreds of people.
They died trying to make American and African lives better. And mostly, their lives made a difference.
Also in the East Room of the White House, President Biden says hello to the champion Houston Astros baseball team.
Remarkable achievements led by, and this is not hyperbole, the legendary Dusty Baker. Worst part was I remember rooting for him as a kid, and I was older than he was.
Also tonight, the Biden administration's plan to cancel $39 billion in student loans for more than 800,000 borrowers. It's now facing a lawsuit challenging the legality. Just recently, the Supreme Court struck down a broader debt cancellation plan. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
And we have a lot more still to come here on EWTN News Nightly, including rallying cry. People in Pakistan react to a jail sentence for the country's former leader. And analysis of the coup in Niger and what it means for the United States. Pakistan's former prime minister has been sentenced to 3 years in prison, sparking protests across the nation. Imran Khan has been found guilty of, quote, corrupt practices. He also faces a heavy fine after being found guilty of accepting improper gifts. He had been arrested in a previous case 3 months ago. Khan plans to appeal his conviction. A Chinese Coast Guard ship used a water cannon to block a Filipino boat from delivering supplies to another vessel in the contested South China Sea. Later, officials in Manila summons the Chinese ambassador to file an official diplomatic protest. Well, tens of thousands of people attended a rally this weekend in Niger in support of the military coup. Well, the massive gathering served as a protest of the West Africa Regional Bloc's ultimatum to release and reinstate President Bazoum. Coup leaders have closed the country's airspace and accused foreign powers of preparing an attack. In a televised address, a coup spokesperson said the country's youth will be encouraged to fight against the outside forces. And joining us now to talk more about this is Brett Bruin, president of the Global Situation Room and a former U.S. diplomat. Brett, great to be with you today. The situation in Niger is volatile, to say the least. The deadline set to reinstate President Bazoum has passed, and it really doesn't seem likely that will happen anytime soon. That said, what do you think happens next, and where is all this heading?
No, clearly the coup leaders in Niamey have little intention of going quietly back to their barracks. I think we are headed to some sort of confrontation. The West African Association of States, ECOWAS, has, I think, put down a pretty good, clear red line. The days of undemocratic rule in West Africa are over. And Tracy, we've seen several of these coups just in the last couple of years: Guinea, Mali, Burkina Faso, and now Niger. If you draw a line across West Africa, it pretty much now stretches uninterrupted from the Atlantic Ocean all the way into the middle of the continent.
Yeah, and Brett, Niger, as you know, has become a rather important partner for the U.S. in a region that could be described as a tinderbox. So how does this current situation impact that relationship, and what's at stake here for the U.S.?
Well, several things. One, I think it's really important to understand the Russia dynamic here. The Wagner Group, we've all become familiar with it now, run by what was a close ally of Vladimir Putin, but still is exercising the interest of the Russian state, has been destabilizing countries across the African continent now for several years. Their hand is behind this coup, and that will push Niger closer into Putin's orbit. Niger has one of the largest deposits of uranium in Africa. That's needed for a lot of Western energy as well as other supplies. And I think it's designed to send a clear message to Western capitals that Russia will hit back, and not necessarily hit back directly at us, but some of our allies.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that because that big rally that was held on Sunday in support of the junta, it's reported that many of those protesters were actually carrying Russian flags. So let's talk a little bit more about, what that signals, if you can go into a little bit more detail, Brett.
Well, I think what Russia's trying to do is to create a narrative that says we are casting off the quote-unquote colonial bonds that tied Niger to France and to the broader Western world, and that Russia, as the Soviet Union did, is coming in, or I should say really portrayed themselves to do, is coming in as quote-unquote a liberation force. And that's what you have heard from coup leaders in Niger, is that we are reclaiming our independence, but in actual fact, it's making it a client state of Moscow. It's making it a client state of Vladimir Putin. So this is very bad news for stability in West Africa. It's bad news for the global economy. And as you brought up earlier, Tracy, it's bad news for terrorism and anti-terrorism efforts.
Yeah, and Brett, I want to pivot now to Russia and the war in Ukraine. A lot happening there as well, including the news that a woman was arrested over an alleged Russian plot to kill President Zelensky, and of course continued air raids and shelling as both sides ramped up their attacks over the weekend. All this as leaders from more than 40 countries gathered in Saudi Arabia to come up with a strategy to bring about a peaceful resolution to the war. Brett, I want to get your thoughts on that. I mean, what is the off-ramp here, or is there one?
I'm afraid there isn't. Russia is only going to continue to escalate, and every opportunity that they have had and will have to negotiate, to bring an end to this conflict, is only going to lead to further not only delays, but efforts by Putin to double down. And we have seen this play out again and again. I think, unfortunately, the solution to the situation in Ukraine will be worked out on the battlefield. The Ukrainians are making steady progress. And I think in a lot of ways, it's important for folks here in the United States to bear in mind that this counteroffensive doesn't necessarily come as a D-Day landing. Instead, it is likely probing Russian defenses, and ultimately we'll find the weakest point and we'll push on that point, and hopefully that will be a successful strategy for pushing Russian troops back to their own borders.
All right, we're going to leave right there. Brett, great to be with you as always. Thanks so much for weighing in.
You bet.
Up next on EWTN News Nightly, possible bankruptcy, an announcement from the head of the Archdiocese of San Francisco. Plus, fight for the unborn. Voters in Ohio head to the ballots tomorrow for a special election tomorrow. The head of the Archdiocese of San Francisco says a Chapter 11 bankruptcy filing is, quote, very likely. Archbishop Salvador Cordileone says the Archdiocese has received hundreds of clerical abuse lawsuits, and they could prompt a Chapter 11 filing in the near future. Ever since a 2019 California law lifted the statute of limitations on clerical abuse cases, the Archdiocese has been served with more than 500 civil lawsuits. Well, voters in Ohio are set to decide a measure tomorrow with implications for the pro-life movement. The measure, known as Issue 1, would increase the threshold needed to pass a constitutional amendment, and it could complicate a push by pro-abortion advocates to guarantee so-called abortion rights on the upcoming ballot in November. The final tally is expected tomorrow, and one report says early voting has been very busy. And here now to break this all down for us is Father Dave Pavanka, president of Franciscan University in Steubenville, Ohio. Father Dave, great to see you as always. It seems that Ohio is really a battleground state in elections, and this year really is no different. Can you talk to us about why Issue 1 is so critical in your state?
Sure. I mean, honestly, Tracy, it comes down to the protection of those who are most vulnerable, and it's the protection of babies. Is that what we're trying to do is to make it more difficult to change the Constitution, because outside forces and people that honestly don't respect the dignity of the human person, the dignity of the baby, want to try to take advantage of that in changing the Constitution. So we want to be able to make it at least a threshold of 60% of the Ohio voters would need to favor a change in the Constitution. Presently, it's only 50% plus one person. So we want to make it more difficult. Our concern is that outside forces are going to try to move in Ohio. Not only try to, they're going to. They've pumped in, Planned Parenthood has pumped in millions of dollars to try to defeat this. So what we want is to vote yes on Prop 1, that would make it a 60% threshold to change the Constitution here in Ohio.
Yeah, and I want to talk about your op-ed in Newsweek. I know you mentioned that a codification of pro-abortion rights would remove hard-won protections for our unborn sisters and brothers. Father Dave, would you mind going into more detail for us on some of those victories in Ohio and how they could be eroded?
Yeah, well, so Ohio is moving towards really protecting, with the heartbeat bill, protecting unborn babies. And if this passes, then it will make it easier for groups and pro-abortion groups to come in and erode those protections that the babies have had. So we want to be able to block that up front. There's going to be another election that's going to take place in the fall, and that is really in the state of Ohio, protecting and making a law to protect the unborn children. So if this particular prop passes, it'll make it more difficult for them to change the Constitution. So we want to do whatever we can do to be able to stand up, to be able to bring people together and galvanize the protection of unborn children. So we are inviting all, not just Catholics, but all people who believe that unborn babies should be protected, and we should have laws that actually recognize the value and the dignity of the human person. We're really grateful here in Ohio. We've got legislators and we've got a governor that are behind this. We just want to make sure that the will of the people is followed through on this.
Yeah, and also, as you point out in your op-ed, one key element at the center of this issue one is the battle between activists and established legislation. Why do you think these activists are gaining so much ground when it comes to pro-abortion rights?
Yeah, I think a couple of reasons. First off, it is really, the first thing you said Ohio is a battleground, and this is a battle. And I think that the pro-abortion groups maybe see a little bit of their territory that they're losing, and they're going to fight back hard for that. There's also a tremendous amount of money that's behind this, that this is, as you know, the abortion industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and they want to make sure that that industry is protected. So they're seeing maybe a little bit of the fight, that they're beginning to lose it, and they're wanting to fight back. And that's why it's so important that those of us who are pro-life, that we go to the vote, that we go to the market and we vote, we enter into the dialogue, we enter into this arena, and we don't just let them fight, but we're part of that fight as well.
Yeah, and I want to talk more about that, Father Dave. I know you say inaction. It's simply not an option tomorrow. Talk to us more about that and what you are calling on from voters tomorrow.
Yeah, so there was some early voting that was possible, but that was stopped for today. So people who would want to vote are not able to vote early today. So they're going to have to go to the polls tomorrow. We're utilizing parishes and the university, helping with those who are pro-life that want to support that. We're helping them get transportation, making sure that they're able to get to the polls. I was just reading an article this morning, and they suspect that it's not going to be a great turnout. Well, we want it to be a great turnout. All the people that are interested in this topic and interested in protection of the dignity and the value of human life, we want to help you be able to vote tomorrow.
Yeah, we're praying for that as well. And
yeah,
Father Dave,
absolutely.
Yeah, and before I let you go, one thing I also want to talk about is these similar ballot measures existing in multiple other states, including Florida, Missouri, and Arkansas. Do you think that Ohio could serve as maybe a bellwether as we move forward, or do you think this will simply be a state issue?
Honestly, it will be interesting to see how this vote goes. The other side has had a great amount of money, even from outside of Ohio, has spent a great deal of money. I mean, we're seeing ads and Instagram, all the social media. So it'll be interesting to see how this turns out. We continue to pray, and we're trying to bring people together to do what's right here.
Yeah, absolutely. Father Dave, thank you so much for coming on and speaking to us about all this. It's always a blessing. We appreciate it. God bless you.
Thank you. You too.
And we thank you for watching tonight. Remember, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at EWTN News Nightly. I'm Tracy Sable, and we leave you with more images from World Youth Day. Good night, and God bless.
Sí,